Oh, excuse me. Hello. Nobody's here yet. Nobody's, the light's going out. So this is about color treatments by the law. See, liberty can't be defended. Excuse me. Liberty can't be defended without being measured as a tool and as a weapon and as a breaching screen by that which was sophistication since before we were here. While it is still in the fact-keeping nature trap that couldn't and can't speak for the nature of the law, but spoke for it anyway. Just like the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones originally still forced to be entertained and self-valued by our founders. While they were forced self-valued, having to hide their actual roles, or the breaching method would have sensed them because it had employed the syntax nature of humanity. It had employed the increasing scientific value, significance of the hyper-simultaneous, increased the value of it, increasingly forbid the use of its significance to value treatments at all formal and informal locations. This is also increasingly relevant too with the sequence shifts, for example, because this is since before computers is a databases oriented uses of all identity ground locations by a method that never stopped. And one cannot understand it if they don't understand how sickly distinctly it was a slavery method and is a slavery method against all. So in other words, until everyone's could have free speech and liberty, like for example, Congress itself and the treatments of it and the reactions to it, individually grouped and together. The branches of government are involved. Their logic together is originally still used remotely. Same thing how other countries in the same semi-ancient trap that stole, which was most probably the republic for which we stand, that which was the Native Americans as their actual history was. We know those people were lying about history into the databases. We know with physical delusions juxtaposed with criminally foreign influence, fact-keeping nature qualities. What is actually recorded, the only reason people's feelings are getting hurt about the evidences of history, because they're leaving out the invisible but discernible. They're leaving out the criminal insidiousness, that phrase. How could that, the people leaving that out are keeping and valuing having kept other in place, taught where that was the answer. And that was or relevant to the answers. Because there are criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and of negative treatments that are simultaneous. I was just watching Judge Napolitano's video and speaking about liberty. And it's nothing against Judge Napolitano. Everyone's trying their best to do logic, from the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones overtly and decidedly, those ones self-valued originally still. People were still fighting about what slavery is because we're not treating about it as an identity of volume, where value is nature / nature is value. That as the invisible but discernible is about, as languages, as English, as every language. The verb is yin, female, and or omega, and female / omega. And the male is alpha / yang, as a per method. And for example, the same way the capital letters show what we know is positive and can only stay forever positive onto itself too. It's temporary positive / forever positive. Now there are exceptions of this though. In other words, because now we're using this is being relative to and through systems, being and having been entertained, all apart from that system, where nature has conjunction to our syntax nature, and to the value of sequence truth before, and to the value of the words that individuals say, and to the value of the honesty of those who respond to it as three manifest branches of government, and all exception nature tied to those three branches of government as hundreds of countries, A through Z, all exception nature and demonstration of the same thing, all individuals groupings, and together the only herd logic that can't defend itself and afford discern the nature of the law properly and their mistakes. So they share, being and having and being using things that people don't even realize. Instances with little instances that before courts that have nothing like to do with anything bad at all, and serious things that are both being used in the furtherance of where and how it used people A through Z originally still, including in how sickly distinctly, not just the people because of color, pigment of skin. For example, with our actor, we want a suburban kid. He's going to be an Italian / Irish like me. So when you hear white, when you're called white, in other words, we could discern the breaching method here, because everyone's been blaming the breaching method, which is increasingly relevant as and to all answers, individually grouped and together, and how the sciences are individually grouped and together with relativity to this, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, in same demonstration of the same thing. The value of the hyper-simultaneous to our logic as a scientific value. We don't have to agree upon the name of that scientific value in every country, but we have to try to. I mean, we have to be on the same page. We have to, either pick a name or say you don't believe that the hyper simultaneous or the simultaneous is significant. See, but people haven't been allowing this spoken. So we're going to switch the colors with this acting. That's how you make a movie. And so, and we're not going to do it like with those narratives, like, in other words, we're going to do this for science, specifically to counter the breaching methods, uses of people's syntax nature, way worse than, way more finite than Wallace completely as, what Jane Austen would be speaking about with the phrase sense and sensibility, for example, or any woman or any man. Though that difference having been measured and maintained with all differences relevant to uses of all words and phrases. For example, like archaeological evidence. So yin yang and alpha and omega, they are our first 2/3 evidences. 1/2/3 evidences. Yin yang can never part, like the capital letters. See, the English and ancient languages, these sounds. See how Russia has letters just like the English alphabet. There's a reason why it's different. There's a reason why. The sciences became criminally foreign influence before modern religion's messengers. That means the sciences were criminally foreign influence and used functionally that way. Like something was off the record still, using all identity ground locations. Now, this is also relevant to what I've been speaking about, where since I was a kid, there have been people interbranch and associated with them, differentially criminally foreign influence, nothing personal, relevant to people that sought me out. And then they call themselves into context, where they used. So in other words, they have everyone has victim predators blaming other things, others ourselves. How and who, why, and how they're using color treatments, good or bad, for relative to that. Like for example, so that we want an actor who's going to. In other words, this is what you discern. You want from when you're young. You want to explain the constant, how you constantly, distinctly, their native rights forsaken, and how simultaneously black people's rights forsaken, per the syntax we're forced to use, or use none. No. Therefore, entertaining what can't be entertained in defenses of ourselves syntactically. Therefore, functionally, relative to where and to how we are going to fight with boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, where and how they were more probably conceived and more practically having been conceived, where and how fighting by the rules is for a purpose at all identity ground locations, areas, and states. So it was not just we have to deal with 5 identities of distinct identities of criminal insidiousness nature. I am not a lawyer. I'm not a police force. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a judge. Not not military. I'm not Native American. But our nature is native. So that's one way that the Native Americans know that the system of the ancients, the system that was once unabridged became abridged, as the Constitution unabridged. Note that and how the president also has to try to live up to and be president / chief, but they are incapable of being compatible. And every modern leader had to entertain locations, areas, states, criminally foreign influence, but no one understand where and how, because all that individually grouped and together had all been ordered to by something greater than and more finite than that. That everyone would self-value rules because it was using them remotely, right back to all identity ground locations, having to value subtle illusions relevant to the predicate acts delivery system method, relevant to where and how. Don't even have to be a lawyer to know that we have to counter the real causes of negative value nature progressions, action nature syntactically. We have to counter things like predicate acts, including fact shipping nature oriented predicate acts, relevant to where and how identities standing of correlation nature are being and having been offensively sensed, where and how if we try to make voice this, because where we could where it is positive. See, where people say it is negative only to the theater, criminal insidious natures of positive and negative treatments that have defended themselves A through Z. There has been no difference. The overt criminal enterprises, the private ones in cities with people with uses of politics A through Z. Uses of nothing, there's nothing we could do about it. No one follows mandated law at locations. That's an evidence. It's slash a hyper evidential. The simultaneous increasingly being having been demonstrated to us and being having been prevented free speech at all locations. Now, the tools of this were per that method that was forced before founding countries, modern countries, forced roles individually grouped in together, tactical terror from how nature has us individually grouped in together, and increasingly as a syntactical tie, as a functional tie, that all those systems were in our ulterior front. So how could they make treatments? How could they counter war? Without self-valuing I haven't been to. Only collusion / as there was never an identity. It was the phenomenon of how no, in other words, it was the phenomenon of the increasing value of Native American rights to be able to sense a system that's not, especially increasingly real. In other words, and by that incapable of being that, since they caused the ground reliant upon. For example, we could buy things in bags and make a soil that has the nutrients that the plants need. But if you have worms in that soil, it's a lot better, right? The same soil. See, the worms don't have anything to eat anymore. We cut the grass down from here to Russia, China, A through Z. Self-valued as that trap that was set before our countries already had defenses of where they had to cause syntactically the people that we have to rely on the other end of bombs and weapons and guns, let alone bombs and weapons like that. At the other end of it, people speaking and having spoken for people who don't know how to speak for positive and negative identity, because the campuses stayed. No one was watching when they would have to rely on someone else to speak for positive and negative. No one was watching while they would have to discern real and blame all the things, though. I have no light. The grouping, the logic of the grouping and the needs of the grouping at campuses relative to one campuses that they aren't even at other countries. There are countries, every country's identity is here and our identity is there. You see, but that's increasingly forbid. The relevance of the significance of it, that which is hyper simultaneous, actually, let alone, that's why increasingly the simultaneous is a value that's forbid. So someone only has to know that police are lying about, and they have been sequence shifting, pretending passions and emotions, using the right to lie on Facebook. And responses to it, know that they used kinetic media to attach me and people around me to fake words, fake ties to other people, fake nature of ties to other people. See, there's a method that forces people to communicate with strangers. So we cannot leave out how individually grouped and together the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the three branches of government individually grouped and together too. And all the other countries how since they were kids, they were kept individually grouped and together on part of an identity theft slash fraud slash slander method that is coupled with and as a torture slash slavery method. It's like five identities of things simultaneously that the observation of where and how is relevant to all subject treatment, it is simultaneously going to be and being and demonstration of the also relevant breaching method, human fact treatment nature, human syntax nature, slavery slash torture slash identity theft slash identity fraud slash identity slander method. Five cinnamon croutons crumble concurrently. So that's what we have to do. We have to break that image of the species integrity, because not one country individually grouped together had integrity, and we need it now. And we needed it when we had to show how it was used remotely themselves. Every individual of each branch of government grouped in together, the same way the overt criminal enterprise and private one, which is relevant to when you bring up the subject, when not anyone who brings up the subject, black or white, relevant to where and how it got this stupid like this, worse than stupid, and relevant to where and how people are still tortured, and where and how people are pretending that they're free, and how they've been getting away with pretending such, which requires also definition of where and how offensively mandated law has not been has been prevented at locations, because at interbranch locations they've been fabricating audio and video, not just with other private locations, but all private to tied to them. That's true. Also at locations, people have been filming things and shown needs to film it, even preemptively. The high uses of that originally instilled North and South, left, criminally foreign influenced of America, where the end rolls was that method of slavery. For example, if anyone tries to deny that a breaching method, a slavery slash torture slash slander slash the method fraud method is not standing, their premises treatments and their quality of fact treatment nature shows evidences of it. And so especially when we think about it relative to the people inside that, the people stacking in New York City. And so there are those additional fake people that we can put in place. Vaccine is great. In other words, I'll donate it. And we could use YouTube ground videos to put in place there'll be like an agency, because one of the other things that is recorded anytime anyone has spoken so far about black and white and how and the significance of it, even when they're not speaking about, when they're bringing it, in other words, it's relevant to other subjects. It's relevant to wars, people speaking at the other end of bombs, people speaking about, in other words, the names of leaders with passions and emotions. You know how many kind of sick natures of sick things that psychology has been involved with, ones with badges. They've been planting evidences with courts, with prisons tied to them, the campuses they went to. Everyone was and is kept needing to hide life progressions tied to this. So I want you to discern this suburban kid as an identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself, as nature, your nature, who's gonna play me as a black character, and for example, relevant to the predicate hyper predicate acts delivery system method, and relevant to us needing to take syntax and treatments of the law greater than and more finite than, well as the value treatments of war's treatments with the syntax of the war. The people with not just because of the psychology and their physical delusions, not just because that's relevant to all the other overt criminal enterprises and private ones recorded and involved with identity theft, fraud method, slander method against everyone sickly distinctly. The method /S has everyone forcing it blamed on other things other than themselves right here where we could hold to to volume science. We could use it to observe how the visible but still discernible, like the subject and the verb or the predicate, the main verb, have an identity of relationship to themselves individually that is increasingly a value/value progression that has a relevance to positive and negative three ways. And for example, 1/3/5 ways, for example, as five identities of sequence/simultaneous nature, where it is bound three ways, we know that the finite, the order of the finite, and the order of what is active as our value/value progression, are moving and past and connect and to come volume. That's the progressive. So they have word the progressive, but this is in other words, New York City. What was and is the progressive value of it when they were building it? But what really and who really was involved, even when it was the same people too, Max. In other words, there were things off the records that are invisible but still discernible that we could discern because there is the existence of the hyper invisible but still discernible. This is why and how calculators work. This is why and how computers work. They work in relationship to locations that are temporary positive or negative. And those locations are given additional values. So additional functions. Because there is an increasing value/value progression. And has its identity of relationship to itself also as an increasing value, where how the being invisible but still discernible is functional. Language is about making the physically discernible also discernible where it is, where the physical has not been. So, although the human organon, vaccines, we must be the species body, the human organon, the two legions, line, control the mind. So this new syntactically leaders would discern how individually grouped and together the private overt criminal enterprises, hundreds of countries shared individually grouped together, and they would forget. And then politics with people A through Z that have nothing to do with that, but everyone forgot too. All that was used remotely by another invisible but still discernible breaching method as that which we must counter syntactically as a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise, and conceiving as victim predator archetypal criminal enterprises countries A through Z, and capable of for speaking for identities course A through Z. That is also evidence. So we have yin yang, alpha and omega, and worse than criminal competence, relevant to the invisible but still discernible treatments of black and white, regardless if people are black or white or pink, A through Z. So, in other words, I'm Italian and Irish, and I had nothing to do with slavery. I don't like slavery. In fact, in other words, the reason they want people to keep having to have those kind of even things entertained. In other words, in other words, we're going to discern the invisible, discernible breaching method. What it's using this for. It's going to show how it was being used for other things, other motivations for evil, other motivations for use to simultaneously. Everyone has to forget about the breaching method. Well, what can we do about that? That's so crazy. School. There just happens to be criminal enterprises, other people with other countries, even if they're made up, too, especially if they're made up, because they're involved planting evidences at location. That's one of the many things that they confess and demonstrate. So I was just telling one of my YouTube friends, one of my best YouTube viewers, YouTube Ron Adams. But I was just telling her, in other words, people don't even realize the significance. The finite see that in the root of the word, the definite article, and the indefinite articles. A and an are the indefinite articles. And you would use before a word that begins with a vowel, like A or E, I, or U. Like, so orange you would say an orange. You would say an apple. See, these sounds have a better than living identity of relationship to themselves. And so it is an application more probably revealed by the ancients, and then again re-revealed, but through campuses that were now through and as identities, as victims, but as victims not really realizing how being used as remotely by that which is the real predator, where and how the law needs to blame something and someone, and relative to all they could do it through our own, here, there, in countries individually grouped together. Again, tactical ulterior from that system that we could discern. So also denials of the significance of and the means by yin yang and alpha and omega simultaneously. The capital letters being distinct from the lowercase letters simultaneously. Again, these languages were revealed to show that which is differentially, increasingly itself anyway, or itself forced from here, lethal IDs, force space nature transfer. More probably what lethal IDs means. One way redeems. So my name is Anthony Wall, but that's why I'm going to use the name Romulus for boxing and for YouTube. But Anthony Wall is my boxing name, but too. I mean, you know what I mean. But Romulus, for example, where men and women are commonly a victim, and they have to both yell at the same time, it is distinctly more of an imposition on a woman. She's distinctly made to needing to go outside of her nature from the man who's needing to yell. If we're going to use a completely fact-cheap nature-oriented fight, to force that quality of fact, chief nature, that does not deny that and how fake integrity, identities, titles, ground identity, ground voices, opinion natures, A through Z, conviction natures, A through Z, have been denying the value of the significance of treatments of black and white. And we're going to throw those other two in there just to show you how insane, too, simultaneously, that which the logic and the methods of torture and of things they were involved with before the World Trade Center attack. See, they were used remotely. Our identities of sophistication. To get it right, we have to have. We can't blame people. We have to use the actual sequence value, truth. We have to go back to the youngest ages because they've been planting evidences in campuses. And there is one way to show this. People will confess, demonstrate, record it. Leading up to and in a 2006 district court case, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence to Corrupt Organization Act, RICO. He was a defendant. His co-defendants were involved with and as three people who were involved with various natures of federal criminals before they got caught. And they hadn't been caught when I was in school up to high school, but then was proven after I got out of high school. But they had already been then and now on off job sites, on off corners of streets and things, on off people's homes, roles with wire crimes, mail crimes, roles with identity theft, fraud, slander methods, acts, and natures, where and how a whole bunch of other countries and our own are with each age of their fact, keeping nature, kept needing to hide the same sequence, yet find act progressive lies and illusions by offensively walking by people, just saying something and some other, so because it's where and how they kept and keep everyone naive. Like, for example, the investigations and the investigators, they are having been kept naive, treatments of positive and negative, incapable of defending themselves, and affording simultaneously the short words and the revelations by that which is hyper evidential, by that which is invisible but still discernible as evidence, that which has been prevented free speech. So if they would make a mistake in courtroom, like, for example, calling someone a witch, they will be able to show the lot. There's a hyperconjunctive value as a simultaneous, as an identity of simultaneous nature. Someone doesn't have to agree about the name. So, for example, the Trinity is manifest as a scientific value. Allah's name is manifest as a scientific value. But both the stewards of the identity ground locations associated with the stewardships of Islam and the stewards associated with the identity ground locations of the stewards of that cipher / decipher, connected as the value of the uses of the religious books and religions, Catholicism and other books relative to it, and treatments of Jesus Christ, which are simultaneously treatments of the ancient republic and of the campus's systems and of times that came before there were criminally foreign influenced sciences, individually grouped and together, and their narratives regarding sophistication, for example. So modern countries A through Z, no matter how powerful they get any individual leader. They can only be over locations, areas, and states, self-valued, and or countering and blaming the real things, but also missing how also blaming how other things other than missing much. In other words, also missing how everyone they painted arrays. They mastered the painting of arrays. People that agree about issues don't agree about arrays of all sides, where liars are pretending to be capable of receiving the truth because we have to deal with how we use all identity ground locations. So we have to have clear how computers work, and that's how they work. And so they were trying to make things more complicated, and simultaneously they know if but then they're dishonest in other contexts. We'll say, well, it's not that complicated to have, each person just has to go online for life. This is the way technology is now. Oh, it's money. So we have to address originally and still how our founders were forced to entertain identities of businesses, private criminal enterprises that can't be legalized. The only reason they were legalized and is because they were a breaching method made types of predators, fact, human nature oriented, A through Z, as victims that needed to respond to it, that were given fact, human nature, premises treatment, sequence treatments, names treatments, everyone. They use a method. So in other words, there are methods individually grouped and together of the branches of government, but that's different. That too is differentially criminally foreign influence, but that too has been differentially criminally foreign influence, and that's having been sustained was used for even worse. That where it's subtle, fact, human nature, evidence, perception locked into roles with identity theft, fraud, slander, then by investigators. People associated with people get locked into social situations. And there's identity theft, fraud, slander with the formal interbranch and investigations, exception nature tied to them, and a whole bunch of other countries and over criminal enterprises, and involved with name stacking against people. And so it starts off with just the three. It already was perfected. The three branches of government. In other words, we can't leave out how they are kept criminally foreign influence victims since they were kids. By the same method that used them remotely as adults. Now they already need to pretend that me and the breaching method couldn't discern. Me distinctly, I could show us all how to discern. And the breaching method could show us even better. But we could discern the breaching method together is, for example, making this movie. So you're going to be Romulus, and we're gonna free the Republic. But you're gonna be Romulus, and you're gonna make a movie about making movies. There's gonna be an industry, but this is gonna be hyperacting. This is going to be, this is not going to, in other words, where people just listen to what others say as actors, and where they pretend others simultaneous. That is being and having been employed to keep the value of the Trinity and its conjunction to the value of that which is simultaneous. I mean, the value of what is actually value, uses of. In other words, the more you know about what is simultaneously true, per its system law, per its perfect value progression system, forever's course. The timeless things, they just gain or lose this course, even force, whichever course it takes. Is by what is greater than and more finite than, distinctly while as a system, then non-distinctly till while it is as the system, any system that would be by force, as slavery, that would need our nature would demonstrate it would need torture. Our nature would demonstrate it would need identity theft, syntactically, self-value roles, nature. Our nature would demonstrate it need identity fraud. Our nature would demonstrate it need slanders. It would need the slanders, for example, to keep syntactically those hyper revelations. Well, you have to see. Come in my skin. No, you'll be. In other words, and it's not about, okay, you have to we're going to represent better than and more finite than. Well, as the best, everyone simultaneously. The only way we could do is I have to listen to. In other words, I don't know if you're here still. Everyone's here. No one's here still, but whoever hears this, I forgot I should have been more social with Ryan Adams. If you come back, I don't know. Ron, someone should share this, please. If someone ever comes, everyone hears this, because in other words, we can make instant evolutions, fruits, and gifts just using the value. Honest, the value/value progression around in conjunction to the value of black and white treatments and how getting away with the uses of it, how having gotten away with it, which is being and having been reliant upon awareness of that unfathomably counterable, but only because there has never been integrity of science and of sophistication to reach out and let them know this is the science. We know you're enslaved, because that's what you hear, and you hear correctly when you A through Z. When you hear the black and white treatments, you hear shock and awe. You simultaneously, if you've been watching the news through time, you hear that and how the shock and awe roles were tricked to entertain, making others' roles with it forced as fake arrays, fake sides needed by the logic that can't defend itself as patriotism, for example, but through reliance upon some unknown men and women's names, with the ones they keep offensively sacrificed. One of the things Jesus Christ was about, that people agree, is that he was prevented equality of fact, cheaping nature in the courts. Just like the columnists A through Z. That means, I shouldn't leave out Native Americans first, and then with that breaching method against them sickly distinctly, because its uses of the syntactic, everyone all missing how we're increasingly no longer the ancients' way. That way that values the increasing value of why and how we are individual, grouped, and species identity of body, individual. individuals in the individual species of body. So group bodies inherit its identities and weakness. See, the individual can deal with the finite and can speak for the finite. And this is an identity theft, fraud, slander method that worsen divides and conquers while uniting simultaneously and using those as tools because its uses of the criminal insidious natures of positive treatment / negative treatments or positive / identity / negative treatments and simultaneously negative / positive negative / identity / positive treatment and simultaneously and hyper simultaneously further as 1/3/5 invisible but still discernible identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, bound individually grouped and together. This is manifest as true as a quality of truth greater than and more finite than syntactically where it is syntactically relevant and value treatments and such. But while as why and how the notes of music are individually grouped and together bound. Same way the cell nucleus, cell body, cell wall /S. The identity of sequence nature and appreciation of the water elements and the air element and earth elements coming through the plant. It's 1/3/5 identities of sequence / simultaneous nature. The cells, the body of volume, right? In other words, so this is what we're going to do. Vaccines. I teach you things. Well, no. So the ancients were more probably more practical. Our founders want us to know, to take control and stop violence and fake and criminal and insidious natures of positive treatments, inclusion as identity theft, fraud, slander, method roles, where and how that method built methods and motivations other than its own, increasingly reliant upon its own originally instilled, where and how people are defenses of positive and negative treatments and of names treatments, including of countries, including of leaders. If I ever say anything bad about a leader with any of my accounts, that was because of what I've been talking about. In other words, nothing personal. I didn't mean it. In other words, what I caught I'm doing. Again, this is since before computers, and this is uses of arrays, uses of all locations, and the positive and negative treatments, and really what was involved with that. And really the significance of exceptions and exception nature. So when people at each age of fact treatment nature, for example, debate economics and their value, their identity of relationships, the subjects treatments individually grouped and together with American history, they left and leave out that which our founders demonstrated we're obligated, which common sense, nature demonstrates rather. Nature itself demonstrates what is actually simultaneously recorded, demonstrates. We're supposed to understand first that and how the real founders had to counter extort the other founders, and they all had to pretend for other reasons than were actual, their actual motivations. In other words, for coming together the way they did, to put forth that we should read the Constitution unabridged, and that real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. See, Marbury versus Madison. So that's all we need. And the value of the black and white treatments and that quality of fact treatment nature that is native pure, in other words, no matter who you are. And see that is being and having been prevented. And so this method measured and maintained, and now measures and maintains. Countries individually grouped and together used remotely. And so they are not allowed to speak about how they are grouped. Obviously, because that's why they're ducking behind it. They'll get their own countries hurt to hide what that I caught them doing first. And from the youngest ages. And that's one of the things to explain it while we're waiting for a response, because Connecticut interbranch switches and forges names as their roles with uses of that which uses black and white, black/white, that means all the colors. Any difference. That uses all physical and metaphysical and identity differences to keep obfuscated how actually the identity works and is and has been used. Now, so you're going to look out and from your same identity of volume, but now you're looking out. Who's going to play me is a black actor. You're looking out from Italian and Irish. Remember that, because white signifies a whole bunch of other things too. And you don't like that quality of fact treatment nature. Not because of its racist. Because you could now you think, okay, this is what I want. In other words, you have to understand that you value. You could discern that sick predator. And you could discern everybody blaming other things, others, ourselves, for that sick predator, even when they're blaming things correctly. That sick predator that we know, we have the intellectual might. We have the capacity to overcome like that. What everyone missed is the extent of the identity theft, fraud, slander method roles and how they use wire crime acts methods and falsified police reports and communications with police forms and courts that have been fabricating things into databases as to how as victim predators with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Everyone kept needing to hide uses of words and identities of sophistication that would have been capable of having been, and that are capable of being now at campuses A through Z, all ages and natures of them. But other is in place of the short words and the revelations by that which is hyper-evidential, by that which is the value of what is simultaneous, that which brings up the order of the finite, that which makes another, and that which was built to an as logic denying that. It is simultaneous through criminally foreign influence, roles with criminally foreign influence, fact treatment nature, aspects, and quality. And that is being and has been you weaponized employed as the tools, the maintenance, self-cultivated, self-valued, of that breaching method that was sophistication before modern countries, before modern religions. Messengers were even born. Boxing is Torah. Reform, religion, reform. Here, tribe. The legion only moves as tribe. / exception nature. Careful. As the species body, or it will rise. All rise. One way correct. Not the slightest thing neglect. Boxing. Let's recollect. Let's recollect. In other words, so we must be able to use that which is simultaneously, as actually recorded, overtly, / insidiously, and valued how overtly / insidiously denied. The torture of and the slavery of and the identity thefts, frauds, and slanders of people A through Z in those locations at Harvard, at all locations, but in New York City, for example, and regarding for the people in the cartoon project, also per how they syntactically have called it projects so long. But what have they made for each group and together? So each, they have to have individuals that they helped, and as where those positive value natures things are being haven't been employed to hurt too simultaneously, because they're simultaneously wicked, worse than criminal incompetence has been pretending other by just proofs of itself, proof of identity relative to where and how. That's one of the things where A through Z, including the branches of government, opinion at every location. Further, individuals A through Z at those locations. Further, locked into it at other locations, incapable of having afforded discern this which we discern, which none have learned but us, who Americans, we're going to stand for these people in the New York City. And we're going to, and in other words, and the acting, nature acting, nature-like identity as identity's volume, no matter which volume form it's in. See, each identity in the dictionary is an identity of volume, where value is nature / nature as value. Extinction, for example, we should fear. We should fear. We should discern that. Earning it. So nature causes positive or negative value, nature progressions, action, nature relative to if we refer to its system or not. Also, we're going to use as evidence. We're going to it's one of the positions of the of this character, this black person who's going to play me is white, and I'm going to play a white person. I'm going to play a black character relative and different parts of history. And see, we need the government to take the money. That's how and then they won't be able to deny you guys, who are actually the 5 boroughs, the means to be into, because then you'll have the money, and you'll have a solution where they have none, because they came through these 6 campuses too. So boxing is fun, but one way alone. for the species body at once. So I'll come home. So even when one loses, they all win. I'll gain. I'll trade. We're in a trap. So each must rap. Same. If evolution science only feels like game, /S. I tell best boxing. I teach you things, but in other words, everyone has to believe. Someone, whoever believes, get some people in New York or any city, your city. We could use the Burroughs book there too. I mean, we could use we could use the same method there too. Counter Burroughs and counter Burroughs. And the system, because it's organized. And because the species longs other and has longed other than these systems have been so long, the means and way redeems when unities aren't forged to pretend, in other words, apply. In other words, they have subjects treatments individually grouped and together, maintained, shown where they are shown, the projections as the perceptions of the identities who speak for the law. They could not and cannot speak for the nature of the law, so we are going to train them each. So, in other words, we have to use this by not having to attack names. They force people to attack them by attacking people first, and the sequence shifts. The extent of it shows also because of their sources interbranch, those locations. And theirs have been distinctly through other motivation engineering, but also by a juxtaposed breaching method that used all locations criminally for and influenced since founding, pounding drums. Excuse me. In other words, then the emotions are about how we could see or discern if the simultaneous, the value of it. Important here, where and how it is in value to all parts of language, to all hearts and soul. Vaccines control your hearts, prepare your minds, behold. It rises to the sky like told. So, in other words, who'll train and who will set up, who wants to do this? We could set this up too. The means to pay for it. Some of the stuff we'll have to pay, in other words, to put simultaneous, to stop things and make sure everything only feels like games and everywhere at once. So in other words, we could connect with the other cities of the world and with other suburbs of the world, which is relevant to where and how we are fact-cheating nature. And because that breaching method, to discern it, and to understand its methods, how it functions, so to overcome it. But not to be led by it, because it shows what's haven't been overcome, and how it employed everyone to pretending other. So liberty's defense stays breaching tools and weapons, and yet a screen, because it has not been. When native way alone, one way, its nature of the law, one way redeemed. See, the nature of the law is about the hyper invisible but still discernible, and its conjunction to and as the value of that which is invisible but still discernible. So, as all parts of English individually grouped and together. And then further, hyperconjunctively to all parts. Control our hearts. Ye species, legion, here. Religion, religion, religion. Tribes, prepare. Exception nature. Hold the fire, bear. A turn. Forever's campus calls us home again. Who'll speak for long will fail, if not this way. Hear many pray, and have. Hear many pray. In many days. Vaccines are says, or not. But even if we say in one we have said and say things correctly, each we have attached to fake words and the motivations for this. For strangers in collusion with strangers since semi-ancient times. Control your minds. I'll show you what is recorded here for real. Attend. Okay. This timeless method calls you back here. And yes, again. Campus Marseilles calls. It's not a real campus. It's another ancient gaming campus because evolution science should only feel like games. Who trains? Who speaks for integrity of the law, of the nature of the law, at the other ends of weapons yet? In this trap since before our founders were even born, involved with the identity theft and fraud against our founders in our faces, overtly / simultaneously to self-value rules. Boxings. Why has not New York responded here for them or someone for them, rather? Because those people that are cartooning the campus. So Sepp goes in there and he has fights with them for the same reason. That's what the trap this is. The syntactically manifest, individually grouped and together, and no one was watching that. No one was fathoming how could be concerned because no one's watching that. So physical delusions simultaneously with criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, qualities, and aspects are inherent relative to treatments of where and how people are speaking for race or using words like values like race or color. Because they have left out, for example, that which is simultaneous, the value of it. And they have left out the value of free speech, therefore, pretending other, needing to pretend other, needing to value other pretending. Even the person with the broken argument, if someone's trying to attend for the nature of the law, the answers would come to this. Criminal insidiousness. It is yet claimed nature here, and it is criminal insidiousness for it is nature that it will not be. It must forbid. Has forbid. Forbear. All gather here and round. Boxing is found. We fight, but by the rules. So we put boxing, martial arts, and wrestling on a website to organize this agency in New York or what city will beat them to this game. Special will be it for you, for each other city, simultaneously though. All train. Locations will become manifest simultaneously. People will be able to do legislative things like that, executive orders like that, and won't be like it won't make other problems simultaneous. Mean stacking is a simultaneous method that will be described by the pamphleteers. The pamphleteers will describe how they have been recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed the people that at the other end of nuclear weapons, here, there, wherever they are, nuclear weapons. For example, just that, and then just think of living. But they have been using criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, qualities, and aspects, and physical delusions simultaneously. And that has been increasingly relevant as some of the simultaneously hyper evidential things. Again, relevant to where and how. All this time I've been asking you guys to make this help me make what we want to do. This, in other words, I'm trying to get me this actor too for us all. You all. So we're going to discern constantly, increasingly, how they won't let little kids. They're going to sense and hurt little kids. Then they're going to demonstrate how and why. But through you won't be able to say it because you can throw other people there per the relevance of where and how weaponized was forcing people to speak through other people. That's why we can't leave out the investigators, and the uses of them remotely. It is also uses of their motivations, because that other motivation, that's why we have to treat it too as identity theft, fraud, slander. They are offensively making instances that they recall and recollect and have other people recall because they show them and they know they're going to have recollection in their mind, showing illusions while people in the background simultaneously tell them things. In other words, that sequence, their line sequence shifts, and the value of simultaneous. The value of sequence true. For example, even though it's gone, is a demonstration of the value of the simultaneous. And also simultaneously demonstration of how its identity of relationship to itself is distinct as a simultaneous nature and as a sequence nature. And how there's a slash between that as a quality of diffusion, where and how one identity of hyper-simultaneous nature before any matter had ever been generated. Its identity of relationship to itself, all parts of space/existence, and the value of that became three increasing values. And we discern it that way as three distinct values, to per where and how. When we really put it out on paper and everything, it shows that. And in other words, manifest are two identities of forever nature that will not mix. One because it's too finite, and one because it's too great, bigger than all things together at once, grouped and individual, so we could discern this. It was more finite than the most finite thing ever physically generated before it was generated, while it was being generated. And increasingly as the value of it, since it's been gone, or while we are here. Let's all prepare. The legion long, tell legion. Strong, be tribes. I'll realize why president/chief. Why industry upon the water, grief, not flows, not not pure. Vaccines. I teach you things below. In other words, to the worms. I have to go do another video specific on the worms. We need to do something for the soil immediately, give the worms food. The soil, there's nothing left, hardly any worms left. And for the birds, countless things, vaccines. I teach you things below. It's not just so the stuff breaks down and gives nutrients to the soil. When those things aren't breaking down, the worms are dying. The negative value of the bugs, the relationship between good bugs and bad bugs becomes wrong. Negative value nature progression, the action natures are demonstrated. We are not using that system that is everywhere at once. See, camp is dunce with stolen name. I'll play this game. 'Tis not. But evolution science feels like games. 'Tis cold, while hot. But even the warmth, even that is invisible but still discernible. So that together in the group, they could not guide. The hyper-simultaneous is functional as the hyper-simultaneous, as the hyper-invisible. So we must stay on the course that and way to teach about the invisible, but still discernible simultaneously. The physics / metaphysics / identity of language / essence and forces the hyper simultaneous to be of value. See how the predicate act is value to the law? Of course, your force unfold. So in other words, New Yorkers want to get behind this. You guys haven't heard me yet. Share this and we will proceed. Because not one has spoken for it. That's another simultaneous thing. There is nuclear weapons through all that time, and you guys still have self-valued roles while you're pretending that integrity spoke. No one has dealt with color and how no one has used what is hyper-evidential, where and how people are using it and having used it relative to treatments of politics, and things like that. Their kids are at the locations too, using those criminal and sensitive natures of positive and negative treatments behind people's backs as victims too, because they overt criminal enterprises, private ones, people that already use all identity, ground locations, them all fake difference anyway. They never had an integrity of difference where it counted and tied to such means. There are way more means that we could stack than just, in other words, who disbelieves? They switch names at the branch. And so locations, areas, and states, they've been hiding what I caught them doing in cases that I have nothing to do with, which I actually recorded. All instances that have been coming before them, they've been using in the furtherance of on off campuses connected function /s by what effectively methodically replaced short words and proper hyper-evidential uses by the short words as the identities of the individuals individually grouped together. So we could see also constant and differential, that which is forbidding proper quality of fact, cheap in nature, for Native American rights, sickly distinctly from Black rights, sickly distinctly from everyone else. Also individually grouped together a whole bunch of other ways. But there is one they share to counter. Fourth, we saw chain. Well, it's a game. for ours. So it now is our prey, our sea, our stars, our gallons, jars. Our players' yards, the field. No need for spear or shield. At campus, forth, the species body found. Does one to move, to use the seasons as we have been told. By seeds, their ways, each different. And how grouped. But now, that meaning other, I meant by the native way. It made bread. So no, we mix. Oh, you can buy this garden soil. It's the best garden soil. No, there's no worms in it. Life, that system. Food chain, slave. Hunt and gather, slave, denatured ground. I'll gather round, we'll fight. Here forth. The species body's might. By syntax course, I'll drop the force, fake sides, the trinity. They could not be. State guys, fake sides and fake arrays and fake middles. Boxing, to teach us things, to move our hearts, to show our soul. We waste not any more time, for of his course is this, and here right now, behold. Here pass me forth to New York, have me heard, be told. The brother's book. And the pamphleteers then sooner do unfold. In wars and all the guys on sides, they lose their means to stand. Then we control the silence right, and when we clap the hand. Boxings. Oh, so who disbelieves? Demand you get the name and sequence right. There is one way alone. For everyone just win. For all must fight. Vaccines, I must recite. Let's get the book going. Let's get the pamphleteers going. You know, people, you guys will rewrite it. You're writing the movie script. If you want to be in it, if you want to be a character in this, just let me know your character. Put your link on this video. You know, show the people. That's right. He's right. He's right. Whenever they make pod black, whenever they use the word black, they're out of their minds. They're using criminally foreign influence premises, treatments, fact, cheapening, qualities, aspects. He's right. Oh my gosh. Identity theft, fraud, torture, slander, it's still manifest. They cannot defend the pretending other and afford us free speech at the same time. He's right. Oh my gosh. Anthony Wall, YouTuber Anthony Wall, youtube.com/C/Romulus Wall. Oh my gosh. The Republic was revealed by Romulus and then Remus stole it. We gotta help Romulus. Fight. See, it's forced. We see the fight is forced on women. But fight right, because it's forced on men. We must fight. We must gain the might to use the nature's course. It drops all things boxing. It cannot be this force. This, that, is other, while its course. Whichever course. a source with simultaneous as forever's. One of the things it is simultaneously, constantly, is forever, a forever nature. Now, a nature I refer to it as, because this is how I learned to think. Because an identity is a nature that has a relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. Not just like identity, and not just like values. As what is the value of what is simultaneous. So we have the identity of the hyper-simultaneous as our subject. We have a juxtaposed with this, the identity of the hyper-archetypal. We have juxtaposed with this, the identities of criminal insidiousness natures of positive and negative treatments, identities as countries A through Z. Inside this greater than and more finite than them, well, as them. That which is hyper archetypal, criminal insidiousness. So therefore, so far, two distinct identities of motivations of the same method as method /S now, because it's the countries A through Z too now. Then we have transnational. So now we have three identities of criminal insidiousness nature, relevant to criminally foreign influenced syntax natures at all locations, areas, and states, or anywhere the species body is. Knew that we'd have to blame names wrong. It knew that people would have to blame other things, others, ourselves wrongly. Use others' names, use your own. Use titles names, use ground location names. All positive treatments, negative treatments, collusion. Illusions deep. It's easy to abuse a kid. It's even easier to abuse a whole bunch of them at once. Boxings to campus dunce with stolen name. Disbelieves. So in other words, I forgot what I was at. In other words, the three. Hyper-archetypal. I'm speaking like this too because you know the words. The people in that cartoon fake project building as the counter tool, counter weapon, counter obfuscated breaching screen. That's the you little rap guy and friends episode I was referring to. The people stacking, the people inside the buildings, people stack. It's an identity of extortion. It's relevant to where and how. Is simultaneously to an identity of slavery, relative to where and how this method we're going to keep slavery, how not treated by leaving out unless it's a fact human nature quality that's not going to deny how additional to the slavery is the torture involved, is the identity theft, fraud, slander involved in the breaching method. And we need to keep those 5 things discerned so we could discern the breaching method. And relative to the treatments of black only heard, treatments of white, therefore of all the narratives it tries to. And where and how as hyper-evidential too. Again, another evidence. How we are individuals actually as volume, distinctly from how we are volume as species body, distinctly from how we are as volume as grouped actually. See, all formal identity, the ground locations abridged. They cannot afford the short words and the revelations. Here, be pledged Yeah. There is no pledge. Just press subscribe under my YouTube videos. And press the little bell icon. So otherwise you still won't see it if you have too many people you subscribe to. Then there's more likely that you will see the video suggested to you when you're online or when you're on YouTube in the stream. We'll have the little bell icon at the top of the little bell icon at the top of the YouTube. Here, sing my song. Yeah, I have to learn how to speak. He'll sing my song. Anyway, this is serious. And the point is, too, where you hear people speaking for the serious, they can't go back and defend those treatments of their passions and their narratives and uses of words like emotions, and like anger, like peace. Was it peace? Was this mutually assured destruction, while the alternative is criminally foreign influenced / delusions wrought / pretending others simultaneously, all offensively to all locations, increasingly. Oh, I teach you things below. So New York game, come here, I'll train. New York City's folks, through the boroughs, up and down. The bicycle has spokes. But the CD is not designed to accommodate that enough, correct? Because we're in a trap. Let's not forget a rap. So, your mini train. When we play this game, boxing, it teaches things. So once we gain this order, we're going to be able to, they're going to open up our towns throughout the country are going to open up spots for New York City, for other people, for Native Americans. There should not be one Native American homeless. In other words, they're the ones best. They should be employed just to sit there and try to think of ways. In other words, there are jobs that they would love, not even it doesn't because it's not a job. Just tell on all the ways the grounds locations are criminally foreign influence. And we have to be on the same page knowing that's there too. And we're in how it's been blamed on the correct things. Even then, everyone missed. What kept that blamed on that? The outcome /S. I tell it best and long because I tell it led by what is simultaneous. Not me nor each. So, what it has grown to teach, more forced away, lethal IDs, extinctions, cores, not sensed, for source, and other sense and sensibilities. Use Jane Austen's phrase, they stand. So we as tribe intend to force free speech. In Madison's course, it's Madison Ave. From Brooklyn Source, through the Bronx, She too, on Madison Ave. It has not been. It led to ending's course, where to begin. In other words, we have not finished. The completion of the revolution We were tricked, forced, hurt, persuaded to call it the Revolutionary War. It was the Revolutionary Revolution, we were supposed to call it. So everyone's campus was involved in identity theft, fraud, slander method. It's very, very overt, but simultaneously insidious. And it is sustained, not to say about how the bad parts of it, I mean, it makes it worse, but sustained to show how how the vertical and horizontal allusions stacking into databases and spoken relevant to that, and relevant to the breaching methods, uses of it, which is at other locations, simultaneously connected for them. So all kinds of instances and bad things, vaccines, we could have stopped. I tried to rap. I'll jump the way I'll hop. I tried that too. I'll jump back down to rap. It never stopped. So now you see we're constant. There's a constant where you see that discern. We will discern. That constant quality of fact should be nature. Worse than criminally incompetent, simultaneously delusions raw. And speaking for emotions and passion anyway, as formal people. And as A through Z, multi-front, arrays of difference only heard, including overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Don't forget that and how criminally foreign influence as a phrase, and how criminal insidiousness, they were not used and are not used. We are simultaneously, even right now, in our faces, overtly / insidiously. Then you have to blame on other things, others themselves, the real causes for those sick things with the laws back then. If the value of that method having not been discerned, no one has learned. You speak for force. Or source, even source. Invisible, but discernible. It's game. No one has trained. Boxing. To teach us things, I teach us things about loan. Someone come online again. Someone here come home. So New York City, other cities too. This will help us. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the black and white treatments. And how are we going to do that if they're forcing it the same way every time? Because we're going to force the quality of fact treatment. They can't defend themselves. And when we say how you going to defend that logic and that quality of fact treatment nature, those qualities and aspects of fact treatment nature, and those convictions and opinions. Like, in other words, well, that's the past. We can't do anything for past. Let's just do it now. Okay, in other words, that past is relevant to now too. But then when they say do now, there's that logic that was being forced by the method at the end of the breaching method. It had the slavery and the torture simultaneous. It had fact treatment nature quality aspects manifest with that type of victim. And they have this still against our founding parents overtly and simultaneously simultaneously in our faces. They got away with it by replacing by having a whole bunch of arrays, different motivations, needs, interests, locations, their family members, all tied to uses of the books. If you're not teaching about how slavery was about criminal insidiousness having been propagated, how a breaching method was forcing everyone to do things they didn't want to do, or worse would be done to them and everyone. Okay, so I'll do that. It's just, hey, no one has trained. So more and more they could not defend. That only capable of being claimed positive or negative, like education. like science. Like science is. Science/S, most accurately. One identity of forever nature is increasing its identity of volume, is hyper-generating more of itself. Vaccines to campus health. And campus dumps with stolen name. /S campus A through Z. Not trains. So they do news articles. Some kid looking over from a computer. Oh, well, there's school choice. Decide which school your kids want to go to. Get out of here. Prepare. Put the sciences together. You teach the science real fast, real quick. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And why and how the people miss the front things, the first conversations. Oh, but they knew the thing. You're missing it. You're missing how all the chaos. It was dysfunctional. There's order by it. In other words, there is order by what is invisible. There's function by what is hyper invisible, but still discernible. And anything that's invisible but still discernible can only be used to discern it. And that can only be used by contemplating it relative to the value scientifically of that which is simultaneous. So was building of New York City. For example, understand the suburbs from America to Russia to China to the world down under, the land down under, Australia, countries A through Z. The ground locations were tactically natured as they had been at the locations of the countries that were involved, or whatever the exception nature they were calling themselves, whatever, that were involved with the colonization of America, with remote control possession from overseas, with the criminally foreign influenced, criminal insidiousness natures. Another phrase we need to teach about American history properly, to be a quality of fact human nature that can be able to defend itself relative to being at the end of weapons like that, has to simultaneously be able to handle, get done and explain for once and at last, and quote, at last, unquote, and quote Martin Luther King, and add to, in other words, the most important speeches are the ones tied to the litigation and the nature of the law. And when in the course of human events, people need to force a unity that simultaneously they need to counter because of that which is already having been entrenched, more finite than those positions, and greater than all positions individually grouped and together, with those sick unities and the fake independence needed to come together for another sick identity of unity. We need to now address that and get it done. Get it done! I'm going to train a variety of actors. Specifically, we're going to go as one body. We're countering slavery against everyone, and where and how this method employed distinctly against everyone, we cannot leave that out. Otherwise, we're not dealing with the method properly. And we're being used by it remotely, blaming other things, others, ourselves for the real causes of negative value nature progressions, action nature, including ones gone. Other was drawn. Ye figs. Fake sticks, ye branches, like the overt criminal enterprises. Uses of words like family and positive, or locations, positive things, the neighbors too. In other words, because this is all locations. Database is tied method /s, and then further though, all locations database relationships. Because no one was watching how the nature one, and that was ordered by instead like instead of the body or memory of a database, that which is hyper simultaneous, that which happened that you could lie about it and everyone could forget about the past. Actual, it is still increasingly valued to our factual nature here. In other words, vaccines is how it works. All things individually grouped together. So people have offensive, they had all kind of physical delusions juxtaposed with criminally foreign influence, motivations, nature's needs, interests, where and how we have experts on logic and mental health, for example. We cannot counter those individuals correctly without countering too various natures of courts and their families members too, simultaneously having been criminally foreign influence. And we can't counter that criminally properly without showing how they were used remotely as victim predators since they were kids. In other words, and you can't do that properly unless we, have mandated law followed for every individual. As a quality of fact, human nature that is not going to deny them the value of sequence truth, in the value of demonstrating how the interbranch and the foreign lie about us together. Because that's, for example, relevant to where and how. What they're doing to everyone sickly distinctly when they don't let people A through Z, no matter what color you are, what like that, show how the quality of fact human nature, relevant to other things. It's relative to who's at the end of weapons if they still are roles with pretending they have integrity or means to speak for the law, nature of the law, and they still haven't had this explained yet or understood yet. And with physical delusions, which is relevant to the switching names and switching sequences, interbranch, individually grouped together, they still value that as means when they are shown that they need to hide their actually recorded natures and their physical delusions and the criminally foreign influenced databases tied to them and the hierarchies being and having been self-valued criminally foreign influence and uses of that. They don't know the extent of it. They know more than they would admit. Them, the overt criminal enterprises, the private ones, insidiousness A through Z, showing how kept needing to hide the same sequences, find an active progressive method, means together. One method, it's a method that exploits how nature works. So nature holds its method up as methods, as 1/3/5. Identities of sequence/simultaneous nature as 5 distinct identities of criminal insidiousness nature that we could syntactically counter on. We don't have to be lawyers relative to this as that one method, as that one simultaneous nature. See how we are grouped is as a simultaneous nature, and that still stays as itself. How we are the species group too. Not just how we are locations, ages, areas, all these things having been applied tactical terror from the short words and revelations relative to subject treatments individually grouped and together, and yet still simultaneously. No one has heard any other, but science pretended it had integrity. It obfuscated long and deep and worse. We must all rehearse. New York City, New Yorkers, Connecticut. People of Connecticut. Stand, don't get ahead of it. It's a species body receipt. Tell me who this bit is. New York. Do you not want, so the people that I know that there are New Yorkers who want me to go really hard for the people inside that project building in New York and the ones next to it. And those people are extorted and are counter-extorted, just like the whole world. Countries A through Z, everybody's extorted, counter-extorted. But see, this is a common counter-extortion that the species, the cartoon value nature system has. She can teach us, because the real species value nature system has a shared self-value, blame the other things, others, and ourselves method of extortion. Having been self-valued, rolls with it, blame the other things, others, ourselves. So, attacking leaders' names has been used effectively to hide worse the actual physics and metaphysics value achievements, identity achievements involved, and uses of them, and that which is actually hyper-recorded, and that which is actually recorded. Therefore, vaccines. We waste our time in things. You waste your time at schools in New York. Fools. We could have been done with this and gone on. We'd be mean stacking. Counting, they'll be replacing what they have been fitting in to keep negative value nature progressions, acts, natures that are only capable of increasing, blamed on other things, others, ourselves. In the past, now actively, as styles manifest. As that manifest, part of even more finite is manifest. Complete remote possession of the syntax nature, or therefore the function nature of each location of America, sickly distinctly. And so we will use how New York sickly distinctly and sickly non-distinctly is the victim of the same breaching method. And we now move not to give them liberty, but to liberate their freedom and them from slavery, not to call that liberty. In a negative value nature progression, that is called liberty. In a positive value nature progression, liberty is additional to that. For the syntax nature, style, force by nature's course, can't be invented. We can only invent two. And use part of filling three. Vaccines to ye, me, infinite. Together ye, species, body, play Romulus. Be Romulus. For men and women have to fight anyway, or stay the victim. Even if he has rewarded ye and each. It's still possession of yourself. And so all would long she breach. I teach but long till New York hears. The species body cries in pamphleteers. Pamphleteers were used to present motivations, and appearances of means to argue with the breaching method, individually grouped and together, being and having been applied, syntax possessions of all locations, areas, and states, was not really about tea, and or nor about tea alone, nor taxes. That which was, that which what with the which really led to the American Revolution. Our founders had to counter extort the other founders. Oh, righteous fear, because it completes possession of the human syntax nature and of its lie progressions, relevant to nature progressions, where our correlation nature, and how our correlation nature was and actually is, and is actually being and having been actually manifest. I tell it best, but long, Maxine's. They force me speak to others, or repeat what others say to us. Others said, clear is your head, mind your business, or deal with the facts being reported by the person. The acts in sequence true. Ah, whoa. So they have recorded themselves with criminally foreign influenced and simultaneously delusions wrought readings of statutes, relevant to where how they have gotten away with this so long, and how outside of interbranch locations, as their collusion with that originally and still at all locations, and further complete possession of the sciences individually who grouped it together, therefore their names. So trains. Don't give me a theory, Einstein's name. In the way of this hyper simultaneous, in the way of that which is hyper relativity, the value of the simultaneous, that which is simultaneous, that is relativity too. Ooh. So someone makes a mistreatment of why and how they put that breaching method black with the law, sickly distinctly. From everybody else, they were sickly distinctly putting and replacing the nature longs. See, we won't stay here like this. It will force Earth's distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous temporary positive benefit to itself rather than for the rest of space nature where consciousness can gain more forever nature also positive unto itself, narrow is forced from here. Lethal IDs. And so to be negative value nature progression, negative value nature to evolution's fruits and gifts, it means somewhere else is one of the theories that the ancients had, where how the scientific values of heaven and of hell were and are used to discern where and how we are living, quality of diffusion, relative to being this system that is pure, or syntactically, and regarding where we speak for, what they call politics. So, for example, as part of the means, which are juxtaposed on a multi-front, to pretend, oh, it's just politics. So we had lawyers too, originally and still. Roles with offensive, offensive penalty on lawyers and the bar itself. Still originally too, planting fabricated audio and video roles at locations? No. So the people who speak for computers, they know there are millions of locations on the computers. Locations. They know there are temporary positive and negative treatments at instances? No. Relative to sequence? No. Relative to that which is simultaneously? No. That which is relative as a circuit? That which is relative to that which is being generated is the identity of value such value progression. That keeping memory. Oh. No, that keeping memory of the temporary positive locations, if they were temporary positive or not, and relative to the sequence or simultaneous. Two keys can be pressed on the keypad. It means a function separately, and then if one key is pressed. I tell it best belong because the computers mimic this, which language is revealed to teach. But also you breach because that's all that they let teach and per method that knew it needed and would increasingly need to have other things, others ourselves, blamed for its needs right there, for actual its motivations. So we have to understand this method, how it works, and how it has been not only unchallenged, because it has been undiscerned. So not one has learned. It's the only way we could discern it is by using that. Say no more, I'm supposed to go pick out some poor victim, because the people A through Z, they've been using black and white wrong. So I'm supposed to go of some formal or informal victim to show how they're victim predators. And, we don't need to do that. We just need to say who disbelieves, for example. And then, because there are people that need to hide this offensively, they get away with it. Relevant to where and how they have the identities, like online companies have to have policies. And that's relevant where and how countries individually grouped together. We have intelligence agencies where they share kids here and there that speak about the law. They're trained about the law. For example, people that work for prisons, people that work with like trying to figure out study problems. And then they're going to define positive and negative treatments, names treatments, hearsay, and hyper hearsay. We have to discern too. For example, relative to where and how they got away with making such offensively, criminally foreign influence, simultaneously delusions wrought, opinions and convictions, formally interbranch, and and locations private tied to them, all exceptions nature, and then firmly at all locations. Get away with pretending that freedom stood and pretending that it's not freedom where it does stand, too, simultaneously. The Trinity is increasingly important. I understand how three identities of the way it is invisible but discernible, tied to where and how we're supposed to describe it three different ways. The way, and really why we're supposed to understand how we are syntax nature, why that term is relevant to computers. Like this. The guy there's a guy who has Harvard computer science he teaches courses. One thing he repeats, you just get how you know this? That's the class. Again, yeah. Read the documentation. For if you're going to be learning to program with C language or you're learning to program with some other language, I'm not a programmer. So I want to do this programming though. But I have my own needs too. In other words, before the World Trade Center attack, in that context and since, there were FBI, military, in foreign countries, remote uses of deans and their kids, remote uses and their families, and therefore their sensibilities, remote uses of principals and their kids, as people criminally foreign influence since I was a kid. Inter cities, on off colleges and universities that were our roles, planting evidences with names with the executive branch all tied to them, but also how differentially criminally foreign influence with areas of overt criminal enterprises and private ones, also recorded involved with all kinds of influences over the family members and people associated with, and students and the family people, professors and stuff, roles with at locations where and how the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and interbranch were are kept needing to hide the same lies and shown to offensively. That's where and how they are used remotely since they were kids. Blaming on other things other than themselves, the real causes of negative value nature progressions, acts and natures. Acts like murders in New York City, natures like criminal insidiousness, roles with that breaching method that connects campuses that are private, public, and some kids go to both now, and even homeschool. It's usually each age of correlation nature, sensed being and having been self-valuing the real short words and revelations actually inseparable from and as an identity of being smart or being wise simultaneously, because even those things are invisible but still discernible. So to know if that's right, we must fight because we are prevented the hyperfunction there. So it's all prepared. Because just like they needed to put up the telephone and the telephones, landlines, and the street lights. The breaching method knew they would have to do things like that. The breaching method knew it was measuring what they were doing. Other things, when they had other obligations too, they forbid. So we'll call them together the ancient gaming system, which is more critically needed than the utilities that are entrenched below, more finite and greater than our own systems, as that our own systems are reliant upon and have been. And so we must too monetize and take manifest another additional tribe we must ask Native Americans to be by themselves as an additional tribe, and by themselves as us groups, and by themselves and everyone where we are grouped to, whoever can find the finite or any kind of proof of Native rights, Native American rights, or of the human volume rights, and sequence nature and quality of fact nature being prevented, the needs by those rights to be addressed properly. And so we use what is simultaneous as that at the end of the other side of war and the threats with nuclear weapons as our side too, where the other side has no integrity. We use that as evidence too. But all sides, they had time. They cannot speak for the nature of the law. They were backed into the thought, just like the kids on they increasingly self-value all the juxtaposed ways of overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and where they hide in plain sight, right where they're undercover, being trained to be under the police with with the other countries. Yeah, your minds. So I don't know what they're doing. I want to start bringing other countries into it. But you guys brought this what it is. All the countries that attacked us and the counters to it with the World Trade Center attack Connecticut interbranch was already involved with having forced them to roles with when they were kids. They were recorded differentially criminally foreign influence too. How he they never had a patriotism nature interbranch. They had some hyper hearsay / hearsay identity theft, fraud, slander natures as victims, but as victim predators. They want and need to be called predators because their motivations haven't been employed too, and they're leaving the quality factory now. They're preventing writing offensively and putting fake exception nature into databases to deferentially signal adapt after. So they've been fabricating emails, uses of Connecticut news for database crimes that came since methods too, that came since before computers. They have the town offices, they have election crime methods, and they pretend people have conspiracy theories when they know what is actually recorded. So the judicial branch, the House of Representatives has been hiding lie progressions because they've been roles with, all levels of politicians, all levels of judicial branch, all levels of locations of these places, including their homes, and where the leaders of New Britain Superior Court through time have been involved with criminally foreign influence uses of corners of streets in Wethersfield with their evidence fabrication, identity theft, fraud, slander method / S roles. That also uses falsified police reports to lock people into roles with abuses of little boys and girls sickly distinctly, individually grouped and together. And they're pretending through other motivations, natures, needs, interests too. They have, even if they get arrested and they catch predators or something when they're using kids undercover, those kids and their family members have been roles with other methods and natures of predicate acts and child abuses and elderly abuses. It's not just stupid logic that conspires to defend achievements of elderly homes in New York City. You came through that trap. You should be, you have means more than that. Forget those companies, but that's part of the employment. Victim predators. They're recorded as victims, but as victim predators. Where they're predators, for example, and you can't refer to them as a victim, is where they want to speak and defend themselves. There is no defense for the logic behind what is standing, especially in New York City. And hand me drums. New York City, train, New Yorkers, gang, this way. 10. Come surging through all things right there and then. The way, the means. One way redeems, made it pure. Call 3 your teams, Yankees, Mets. Drop all your bets. The 10. Alphabet. Alpha. They have that word used in the identity theft, fraud, slander rules, where the differential of criminal foreign influence is increasingly relevant. Boys, thank you, everybody. Hope someone think about this. Do a video and say, or if you don't want to do a video, because maybe there's a lot of YouTube people with YouTube channels don't even do videos. But if you guys know anyone who does a video, or tell someone, please make sure Anthony Ball gets a response too, because I want it tied to all the Fox News, MSNBC, CNN. Your Facebook pages are also recorded involved with criminally foreign influence statutes that leave out and left out and self-valued that how they have been exploiting exceptions to where and how they don't have rights to you to lie, and how they've been using Facebook for child abuses of juxtaposed natures of child abuses too, uses of that recorded, and intercities connected through time. They've been using the sensibilities of police forms retired and standing that have been using databases information that is criminally foreign influence. And they're keeping remote uses of that because we have to get that formal part. And we can't give up how the other nations, since they were kids, kept the ones from Weathersfield, criminally foreign influence, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, trying to film fake exceptions, forcing people to speak through others, and lying about sequence shifts. The same people involved with sequence shifts presented to the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center towers, right next to the World Trade Center towers, right before they were attacked. Post-dated documents had been, it was proven afterwards, had been presented to the panel of judges right before the attack. Post that had been post-dated to appear late. And then, in other words, they had been brought to the place in time-stamped timely at the Ninth Circuit in New York City. That proven, and it was proven that from inside the court, they had time-stamped, they had posted dated the things that had been timely brought to the court, the legal papers, tied to a part of a case /S, and to names from Connecticut that were involved interstates as people involved with a whole bunch of other countries, including the attacking nations. But they had forced those people from the other countries to roll with them with predicate acts, with people who went to grammar school I went to, and as people that were involved with predicate acts with families or wrongdoing with families next to campuses I went to, and connections between uses of that time, which is also evidence and is also recorded. And they've been lying about what is actually being and having been recorded, interbranch, relative to where and how they've been using the pseudo sophistication. And, there are proofs that Hitler and that Mussolini were trying to counter that which is involved with a whole bunch of different natures of abuses of each age of fact human nature, individually grouped and together distinct and then bound, together bound. But everyone was missing where and how all that is really being and having been exploited at all locations, areas, and states. And then further, through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, that through those motivations at the locations, with subtle things, with offensive evidence reception racketeering. We can't separate that from where they are differentially criminally foreign influence. But we cannot separate where the branches of government individually grouped and together are the only ones responsible too at the same time. When there's overt criminal enterprises manifest, which is going to stay because of the roles and uses of the campuses, of the suburbs, and of the urban, and of the rural sickly distinctly, to keep all the sickly non-distinctly from being discerned in the same names, because uses of those motivations too faked when there are other recorded ones. And those apparent ones, even uses of people's kids. We have to understand how fact, human nature, predicate acts, roles, and methods could be motivating or existent, relevant to people's actual motivation. And where and how. That's what the interbranch use, where they force people, where they self-value roles, forcing people to speak through others criminally. So we're going to need these words, criminal foreign influences. We're going to need words, phrases like, we're going to need the phrase criminal insidiousness to teach American history, which also requires teaching about how other was motivated, told, and pretended honestly. Even, pretended right. So CRT, community resources training, and how that goes with critical race theory.
This is also relevant to where and how remote uses of the FBI pseudo sophistication actually recorded and their physical delusions simultaneously, where it is also relevant to where and how people have been making opinions and regarding their uses of the chaos with group and where they try to do protests relevant to where and how they had logic proper when they were in grammar schools prevented and middle schools. So they're high school, college, and adults that are still delusions wrought and criminally foreign influence logic styles and natures as actually recorded. Again, per the invisible but still discernible. This is one of the ways it wants and needs us. Nature demonstrates us to syntactically speak for as nature. Thank you. Have a great day, night, whatever time you watch this volume. This value, I mean, this video too. New York City, New Yorkers, A through Z, please watch this. Any and every age, it is for you. There's a button that says, is this made for young people? I put no because then you can't have comments. This is for young people best. Boxings, they're keeping obfuscate because they're shown to sense and to discern their worst in criminal competence and needs to pretend other. The FBI. Relevant to this too, where and how me and people, in other words, the police and the interbranch have been fabricating police reports since we were kids, as their roles too with Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN with New York leaderships speaking about like they use the phrase revolving door, and where they use the phrase criminal, and where they use the phrase immunity from prosecution. They've been leaving out exceptions and exception nature. They've been leaving out what they're actually recorded being and having been involved with, including with the prisons tied to them, including children's prisons. It is simultaneously worse. It simultaneously rolls with that method that Joseph Mengele was involved with. Because sickly distinctly, because they want that remembered and needed. Blamed rather than the actual premises treatments. And which actually recorded shows all kinds of physical delusions simultaneously criminally foreign influence, fact treatment nature, quality, and uses of it with psychiatry tied to courts and police forms and countries A through Z individually grouped and together. Sick. Relevant to two people pretending passions and emotions regarding American history. And we don't settle it because they're involved with identity theft and fraud methods. That's the only reason they get away. One of the ways they got away with blaming other things, others themselves, what our founders left us actually to tell for themselves. Air. So it means appear. Fake branches fold and fall. I caught you first to your wall. Romulus comes home to find you such. I break you much. Thank you. Have a great time. Connecticut, New York, spread the word. Let's go. We're gonna force treatments of black and white to show demonstration. They don't have the means to speak for anything. Vaccines. We want instant